I'm Jane O'Brien. As Al-Qaeda issues an intimate statement admitting bin Laden is dead, Barack Obama thanks and decorates the US troops who killed him.
It was a chance for me to say on behalf of all Americans and people around the world, job well done. Job well done.
How brave are the Syrian protesters? In city after city, people take to the streets yet again, defying government threats and violence. 5 days after the raid which killed Osama bin Laden, today a statement, purportedly from Al-Qaeda, confirms his death. The message, posted on jihadist websites, threatens retaliation, warning that America's happiness will be turned to sorrow. It also promises to release an audio recording that the Al-Qaeda leader supposedly made a week before his death. From Pakistan, the BBC's Ola Girin reports.
This amateur video is said to show Osama bin Laden's bedroom, effectively his prison, the small space where he spent 5 years. We can't verify its authenticity. He may have passed the time here plotting new attacks. US officials claim a handwritten note found in the compound sketched out a plan to derail a train in the US on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Today, near his compound in Bilal town, graffiti renaming the district and saying, "Long live bin Laden." But soon the security forces painted over the slogans and denied us access to the area. And just a few minutes away, another forbidden location, the local base of the ISI, Pakistan's main intelligence agency, which somehow failed or neglected to capture him. USA! USA! There have been protests on the streets, here and elsewhere, against the US operation which killed bin Laden. The covert solo mission has inflamed anti-American sentiment.
Well, the protesters are on the move now. It's a noisy demonstration here. There's a lot of anger about the raid on bin Laden's compound, but people here are also angry at their own rulers for cooperating with America.
They condemned President Zardari, but most of the fury was aimed at President Obama. This man told us he would shoot the Americans himself if they ever returned.
They attacked on the sovereignty of Pakistan, they attacked on the dignity of Pakistan, and they came into the territory of Pakistan. They have no right to come in the territory of Pakistan.
Demonstrators here say the Americans have killed bin Laden the man, not bin Laden the idea. Orla Girin, BBC News, Abbottabad.
President Obama was in Fort Campbell, Kentucky this afternoon, addressing soldiers recently returned from Afghanistan. In his remarks, he vowed that Al-Qaeda would ultimately be defeated and offered his gratitude to US service members involved in the operation which killed Osama bin Laden.
I came here for a simple reason, to say thank you on behalf of America. This has been a historic week in the life of our nation. Thanks to the incredible skill and courage of countless individuals, intelligence, military, over many years, the terrorist leader who struck our nation on 9/11 will never threaten America again.
But while Osama bin Laden may be gone, could his surviving network still wreak havoc on the US and other countries around the world? Well, here to help answer that is former State Department spokesman PJ Crowley. Mr. Crowley, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure, Jane.
Now, Al-Qaeda has already threatened America, but with its leader dead, do you think that it's in any position right now to carry out another attack?
The short answer is yes. Not so much the core Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and in that area, but over the last 10 years, Al-Qaeda has transformed itself. It's now a much more diffuse network. You've got franchises in places like the Maghreb and places like Yemen. And in fact, the last couple of terrorism attempts against the United States had ties to Yemen as well as to Pakistan. So they're certainly capable of doing that.
So given that scattered organisation, do you think that any of the information located on these laptops is capable of giving us information about preventing attacks in those parts of the world?
Well, certainly, just as the revenge motive, gives them an impetus to attempt something in the near term, by the same token, the fact that bin Laden's gone also gives intelligence and law enforcement an opportunity. They'll have to communicate in order to affirm Zawahiri's taking over as the presumed leader with bin Laden gone. Others may try to fill that void. That means that there will be chatter in their network, and with chatter comes an opportunity for an intercept that could lead to an arrest. But certainly the computers that were found in bin Laden's room do provide additional information. Some of the information might be dated, but these are all good intelligence finds.
Now, moving on to the US relationship with Pakistan, which of course is now very much in the spotlight, do you have any doubt that somebody within the Pakistani government knew that Osama bin Laden was there?
Well, the short answer is either there's complicity or there's incompetence. Not pleasant choices. For Pakistan. I was with Secretary Clinton a year and a half ago where she said to a group of editors, it's hard for us to believe that no one in the Pakistani government knows where bin Laden is. These are questions that deserve answers from Pakistan. Obviously, with your report, they are embarrassed by the discovery. But the real question is, how can this relationship, complex as it is, move ahead? Pakistan's a little bit in between. They've had relationships with these groups in the past. As I think Secretary Gates said today, they've hedged their bets. But by the same token, they've come to begin to realize that these extremist elements that are a threat to the West are also a threat to Pakistan. They've moved a little bit. They have to move some more.
So how can this relationship develop, very, very briefly? What is next for Pakistan and the US?
It's very complex. And Pakistan does play a dual game. And it's a question of strengthening the government to where they can face down the threat that is a threat to them as well as to others.
PJ Crowley, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
All right, Jane.
Now, if 9/11 remains America's most searing encounter with international terrorism, the so-called 7/7 attacks in London occupy a similar position in British consciousness. The Al-Qaeda-inspired bombings of 3 underground trains and a bus on July the 7th, 2005 killed 52 people. Today in London, the official inquest into the attacks was completed. The BBC's June Kelly has the details.
This summer sees the 6th anniversary of the London bombings. These inquests heard 5 months of evidence from over 300 witnesses. They told the story of the 7th of July. 52 were murdered. Today the coroner said they had been unlawfully killed in a dreadful act of terrorism. The inquest looked at how London, for some of the victims their adopted city, responded to a long-feared attack by Islamist fanatics. The bereaved families had to take in the coroner's 60-page report, culminating in a clutch of recommendations.
Whatever is written down here, whatever is recommended, whatever has been said, can help people in the future, one would hope, and one would hope the recommendations are effected, but to me they help me not at all. They do not bring my son back.
A major part of the inquests focused on the emergency service response. The coroner highlighted delays in dispatching fire and ambulance crews.
Our staff were brave, they provided fantastic treatment and care, but should we have had more resources to those scenes more quickly? Yes, we should.
The coroner, Lady Justice Hallett, said on the balance of probabilities, each of the deceased would have died whatever time the emergency services had reached and rescued them. John Taylor's daughter Carrie was one of those who did not die instantly.
Could they have been saved? Well, Carrie might not have been saved, but she should have had the chance. So should have all the rest of them.
The other big area for the inquest was the role of the security service MI5 and whether the attacks could have been prevented. The final images of the 4 young men who were about to become the UK's first suicide bombers. 2 of them had come onto MI5's radar more than a year before they set off to commit mass murder. Prior to the 7th of July, a surveillance photo of the pair was cropped to this by MI5 as they tried to establish their identities. This just one area
where the security service comes in for criticism from the coroner. MI5 are also accused of failing to correct errors in a report on 7/7 by the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee. Lady Justice Hallett says it's essential that the ISC receives accurate information from the security service so that it can properly hold the service to account and report to the Prime Minister, Parliament and the public.
I and my government colleagues will now be considering very carefully the coroner's report and recommendations.
And the families are appealing to the Home Secretary to act on those recommendations.
It's not acceptable to say that she'll consider them and then nothing to happen. These recommendations have not been made lightly.
It was the worst terrorist attack on British soil. The emergency services and MI5 both say they've made improvements and learned lessons from the 7th of July. June Kelly, BBC News.
Across Syria today, thousands of people took part in anti-government protests, once again defying the heavy presence of security forces. Clashes were reported in several cities, and activists say at least 30 people were killed. Foreign journalists are not allowed into Syria, but our Middle East editor, Jeremy Bowen, has been following developments and filed this report.
Just outside Deraa, the place where the protests started, women and children joined the latest marches. They were prepared to take the risk of being shot. It's a sign of fear evaporating. That is bad news for the Assad regime. Once again, across the country and in Damascus, demonstrations followed the noon prayer. The BBC's reporting is relying on amateur pictures and information coming out of Syria. Like other news organisations, we have not been allowed to send teams into the country. Demonstrators were shot in Homs in central Syria. The official news agency reported that 10 soldiers and policemen were also killed by what it called terrorists. But human rights groups are not buying the regime's claims that it's facing an armed insurrection.
What it looks like here is a systematic attack on a civilian population, a political decision to shoot to kill unarmed demonstrators. And that could very well be a crime against humanity.
On Syrian TV today, President Assad was still looking like the man who'd spent 11 years in power promising reform. But in the worst crisis he's faced, he's choosing repression. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.